Hey there, before we get in the episode, just a couple of things. Make sure you subscribe so you get all the episodes to begin with. Also, join me for in-depth conversations at grief2growth.com/community. That's grief, the numeral 2, growth.com/community. Another thing is on Substack, grief2growth.substack.com, where you can get a lot more content from me and actually engage with the community there as well. And now, on to the podcast. Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hi there, I'm Brian Smith. I'm your host at Grief to Growth, and whether you're joining us for the very first time or you've been in this journey for a while, I want to say welcome to you. This is a podcast where we explore the big questions: who we are, why we're here, and what's coming next. Together, we navigate the complexities of life, of grief, of growth, uncovering ways to heal, finding meaning, and embracing the magic of just being human. And today, I'm thrilled to bring you a conversation that dives deep into the intersection of creativity, healing, and spirituality. My guest today is Max Rissman, a filmmaker who has been captivated by the power of stories to transform our lives since he was a child. When Max was just 4 years old, he convinced his parents to reenact The Wizard of Oz with him every night, planting the seeds of a lifelong passion for storytelling. After earning his MFA from NYU's prestigious film program, Max now creates deeply moving films about wounded characters learning to forgive themselves and to heal. And isn't that all of us? His first feature film, Upon Waking, will be released this Valentine's Day on Amazon Prime, Fandango, and Hoopla. And it's a powerful exploration of loss, transformation, and the journey towards self-acceptance. And I was fortunate enough, Max sent me a copy of the film to watch before, and it's fantastic. So I want to say, first of all, I do recommend it. In this episode, we're going to dive deep into the spiritual side of filmmaking, how Max taps into intuition and creativity to bring his projects to life. We'll also explore how NDEs and other profound moments of transformation shapes the stories he tells. And if you've ever wondered whether or not you're ready to embark on a big creative endeavor, or our art can be a pathway to healing, you don't want to miss this conversation. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Join me in the Grief to Growth community at grief2growth/community afterwards to keep the dialogue going. So with that, I want to welcome to Grief to Growth, Max Rissman.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, or thanks for being here. And I appreciate you sharing the film with me. I had a chance to watch it last week, and it was awesome. But before we get started on that, I have to ask you about The Wizard of Oz, because that is my all-time favorite movie.
Of
And
course.
the age difference between you and I, when I was young, it came on once a year. And so if you didn't see it then, you didn't get to see it, but I watched it every year. So tell me about your fascination with that film.
Man, well, I can't even imagine growing up in a time when you couldn't like pop in a VCR or,
It was dark
casette
days.
something. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, no, I think I must have seen it when I was like 3 years old, and I would dress up as a scarecrow like pretty much every chance I got. And yeah, I mean, it's just such a, beautiful, captivating film. But, I think the message that you have what you're seeking inside of you, and you can go on a big, elaborate, exciting journey and meet all these people and have all these adventures, and it's worth doing that. But, at the end of the day, you do possess what you're seeking on, at a deep level inside of you.
Mhm.
That message always stuck with me, and I probably couldn't understand it as a 3-year-old, but it must have sparked something in me because, it was very influential.
Yeah. Well, I think that movie hits on so many levels because I liked it when I was a kid too. And then I watching it over and over again, every time you get like a different message. It hits you at a different level. At least that was my experience.
Totally, totally.
Yeah. So when did you decide to become a filmmaker?
Yeah, so I was loved writing. I was a theater kid, growing up, and so I
Mhm.
acted in all the school plays, and I started writing plays when I was a teenager. And then when I was in college, I had an opportunity to study abroad in Prague in the Czech Republic. And that was just a magical experience because, Prague is this magical medieval city with all these, castles and, super historic architecture. And I was studying at this film school that was like one of the only and, kind of the preeminent film school behind the Iron Curtain for, a lot of directors coming out of the kind of communist bloc. And so a lot of, very well-known directors like Milos Forman studied there. And he ultimately came to America and, directed One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and a lot of, super well-regarded films out of Hollywood. But he got his start in Prague at this film school that I, was also attending. So
Hmm.
that was a really inspirational experience. And I got to make my first short film there. And I just got totally hooked. So yeah, after that, I just knew that I had to be a filmmaker.
Yeah. So, how do you choose the subjects for your films? Because I mean, film can be anything, right? I mean, literally, you can make movies about anything. How do you choose the subjects that you make your films about?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it kind of just, a lot of the times it just hits me. I get a lot of inspiration just from thinking, what would it be like if dot dot dot, or, what would happen, kind of just asking what if questions all the time and, exploring how characters uh would deal with and act in certain situations. With Upon Waking, I knew I wanted to make my first feature film, and I wanted to come up with an idea that could be done, in a relatively contained way with not too many characters, not too many locations. That's kind of like the rule of thumb for like trying to make an inexpensive, first feature film.
Hmm.
And I was really struggling to come up with what story I even wanted to tell. And, I was just kind of iterating a lot of different ideas and nothing was really working. But when I started learning more about near-death experiences and how transformative they can be for the people who undergo them, people often emerge from them with a totally new perspective on life and what's important and what matters. And that combined with, the idea of people falling in love and how transformative that can be, to combine love and the near-death experience was a very compelling notion for me. So I just took it and ran with it.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think you did a great job with it. I have to say when I got the email from you and said you had a film about near death experience. I assumed it was a documentary because most people don't. This is not a subject that a lot of people I think cover in film. I was really surprised to see that it was a feature film or a fictional film, I guess. But I thought it was really well done. And you mentioned those films where it's a contained, limited set and limited number of characters, which I could say for budget reasons is necessary for some films. But those are some of my favorite films because then you've got to really focus on the characters instead of focusing on all the CGI and the action and stuff like that. You can really focus on the dialogue and the characters, and that's what I really loved about that. And through the course of this film, you get to know the characters, very well.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I personally have never experienced an NDE, so all everything I know from near-death experiences comes from learning and reading and research. But yeah, just kind of being able to synthesize all of these experiences that people have gone through and all the parallels. and create the story was, it was really compelling and really rewarding.
Yeah. So I liked it was interesting. I love the part in the movie where like they and I don't want to give a lot away because I want people to watch the film and to be not have me giving too many spoilers. But there are different rules to different realities. And at one point the character describes these are the rules to the reality that we're in. I thought that was really well done to talk about. I love the way you introduced that to this place that they find themselves in. And it was also, I think, really cool that you did a shared NDE because people don't talk a lot about shared death experiences either. So I think that's something that is going to be new to people because it actually does happen. So
Right.
these characters
Right.
find themselves in a shared death experience.
Yeah, exactly. And what could be a more powerful way to, to get to know someone and to, fall in love with someone than, to kind of uh be have to leave this physical world behind and, kind of strip away all of the artifices and, pretensions of of normal reality and like really delve deep into this kind of uh, by being trapped together on the spiritual plane. That was definitely something that I thought irresistible to explore.
Yeah.
Um, because in the film, like, these two characters, they go on a first date and it's not going very well. And they're kind of like polar opposites and probably would not wind up together. But being trapped together in this near-death experience, they really get to connect on a much deeper level and, get past all of the nonsense that people usually talk about on first dates.
Yeah, yeah, I thought that was again it was another thing that was really interesting about the film, the way the characters did come together, and I love the themes of forgiveness. That's a big part of the near death experience, both for other people and for ourselves, and how each of the characters develop that. So I think that's I think a feature of a lot of your films is you talk about those types of things. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I forgiveness is a super important theme, and it comes in so many different flavors. And yeah, and so that's definitely something that I always find myself exploring, in a variety of different genres and a variety of different super different kind of stories. I always find myself coming back to talking about forgiveness.
Yeah. So what's the process like of making a film like this when you don't have a major budget, right? And you've got to find actors and all that kind of stuff. How does that work?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm testing out a new feature. I'd love to get your feedback on it. It's called Fan Mail, and you can send me a message right from the show notes of the podcast. So look for the link that says send me a text. You can ask a question for a future podcast. You can suggest a guest or just give me any feedback you want. Just remember, it is one way. I can't text you back, and I will not have your name, your email address, or your phone number unless you include it in the message. Let me know what you think.
I mean, it's a crazy process. You certainly need funds and you certainly, you need actors, you need crew, you need the money to do it, to hire everyone. And you need just kind of the logistical and, artistic experience to to know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so I mean, I made a bunch of short films when I was in school, and that was, some level of practice, but it really doesn't prepare you for the the giant ship that you have to steer when you're making a feature film. That as far as films go, this was a very, on a very small scale. It's considered like, very low budget, even though it still costs a lot.
Yeah.
But but yeah, like when you're making a bigger film, then there's all this infrastructure.
We're interrupted there, but we're back. So we're going to talk about like the process of making the film, what that's like to try to, I guess, gather a budget and find actors and find crew and all that when you don't have a studio or something backing you.
Right, right. So yeah, I mean, if you're, trying to make a film, you need a lot of things. You need actors, you need crew, you need equipment, you need locations, and you need the money to pay for everything. And then after the film is shot, there's a whole big post-production process that also takes quite a lot of time.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, you basically you need people with expertise in all of these different areas, to kind of be at their best and elevate the film, in their specific area of expertise. And then you need the logistical uh abilities to kind of coordinate everything and, make sure everything is running along the right track. And then, you need to, as a director, you don't really know how to do everything. In fact, there's a lot of things that you don't know how to do. But the key is to kind of empower people to be at their best, and
Hmm.
then, they come to you with questions, and, it's a collaborative process in every aspect of filmmaking where you're collaborating with the people that you've empowered to, uh, make the best work. So you're kind of the central nervous system of the film.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it can be a very lonely experience because you're just desperately trying to get this movie to breathe life into this movie, and you feel like you're walking in the middle of thin air, and you could just plummet to the ground at any moment. But
Right.
it's also a very communal and uh connecting experience, because you're connecting with all these different artists, all these people have come together to like make your dream come true.
Hmm.
And it's very inspiring and very gratifying. And yeah, I mean, basically, you go through a lot of pain and a lot of torment and a lot of stress to, come together for a couple of weeks and make something beautiful. And those couple of weeks makes all that other time worth it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how do you, because the characters are so interesting and all the different things we talked about, we talked about forgiveness, we talked about self-forgiveness, and there's a lot about family dynamics in there, with the different characters and how those interrelate. So how do you come up with that? Do you feel like do you just make it up, or are you inspired somehow? Do you think it comes from somewhere else, or where does that come from?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it comes from universal themes that we all, that everybody goes through. Like, certainly I have my own fears and insecurities and, doubts, and I can kind of, you know, filter that through like the different characters and, the
Hmm.
particular issues that they're going through. And, each person is dealing with their own iteration of I guess you'd call it the collective shadow. But it is a collective shadow. And, that's what enables storytellers to, tell a story that makes sense and resonates with another person, is because, we're all there's all these underlying um, currents that are running through all of our lives. And while the particulars might be different, you know, the uh, the core of what people are going through is the same, I think. So yeah, so uh, a lot of the characters are you know come from myself, but it also comes from what I think are kind of universal uh, you know, themes and elements to every person's internal world.
Yeah. So, what role do you think that spirituality plays in filmmaking for both you personally and even for your audience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just the fact that every movie is such a leap of faith, and there's so much uncertainty and so much instability and so many things that can go wrong and almost do go wrong. And then somehow, the ship stays on course, is, that is a real leap of faith to kind of say, okay, I'm going to make this movie but I don't know how I'm going to make it happen. But then you figure it out and you do.
Hmm.
I can say for every one of my film projects, and everyone that I know who's made a film has had so many, you know, I guess you'd call them near-death experiences of filmmaking, where like the film almost crashed on the rocks and died.
Yeah.
But it managed to be salvaged, and oftentimes, the thing that you were so upset about losing, or threatened to derail the film, turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. So it really is kind of an exercise in um, stepping into the unknown,
Hmm.
is making a movie. Um, and yeah, and I mean, I not every film has spiritual themes. Some films can just be purely, entertainment, and that's great. But yeah, I have the privilege of taking this film to several film festivals, and screening it in front of audiences. And it doesn't resonate with everybody, but for the people who it does resonate with, it seems to make a major impact on them. And it's kind of every filmmaker's dream to, be sitting in front of a stranger watching your movie and hearing them cry behind you. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the the cream on the cake, if you will.
Yeah.
And I never had a conversation with this person. I never, met this person, but to kind of hear them crying while, watching something that I just pulled out of my head, was a very meaningful and gratifying experience for
I
me.
would imagine that would be. The thing is, I was thinking that there's some movies that are, they're just made for entertainment. They don't really move us. They don't change us. We go to the theater, we watch it, we might laugh, we might be scared. There's a whole lot of horror films out there now that, you could say are spiritual because they're talking about, demons or whatever. But there's also those films that you can tell are designed to deliver a message, to move us, and maybe we even leave the theater changed. And I think that's what I see in a film like this. It's so. What messages would you want for people that are coming into your film to take away with them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know how many people have heard of near-death experiences and the kind of the whole zeitgeist around them. I'm sure many have, but many haven't. And for people to know that that's a thing, and that, it's actually something that, there's a lot of common experiences that people have when they, have NDEs, and that there's inexplicable things that happen when people have NDEs that that really challenge the notion that we live in a purely material universe.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, that is definitely something I hope for people to at least be curious about, if they haven't heard of or delved into NDEs before. Um, but also, well, the film, there's a lot of people confronting their shadow selves in the film,
Yeah.
and having, because they're kind of in this spirit, this spirit realm, their shadows and their fears and insecurities are, you know, uh, basically they come to life.
Right.
And, I think a lot of people struggling with these kind of uh, issues, they feel very alone and they feel, not like they're the only person who might be um, dealing with these kinds of things, even though, that couldn't be further from the truth. So, I hope that people might, realize that their self-loathing and their insecurity is not strictly confined to them, that everyone is dealing with that on some level, and that you know, there's a way for people to transcend those things.
Yeah. Well, I think, for me, it's interesting with film or when you're watching a movie or reading a book or something. I think to really get into it, you have to somehow be able to relate to the characters, even though they may be very different from you on a superficial level. So for me, being a black man in my 60s and watching a movie about two young white women, it's like we don't have that connection that you might see, uh, on the surface superficially. But I love the way you brought through, as you said, the insecurities and the fears and all the things that we all have that we can all relate to. And again, I think the family dynamics, the things that were going on there and watching the characters develop as they went through the struggle, I thought it was really moving for me. And I'm curious, you said you've taken it to some film festivals and you heard someone behind you, crying. What kind of responses did you get from people? What kind of comments did you get?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I don't think that everyone gets this film. I think that a certain, a certain type of person gets it, and it's
Hmm.
not for everybody. But for the people who got it, and that it resonated for, they've uh, they didn't really get into too many specifics about like what particularly stood out to them, but just,
Hmm.
the fact that it impacted them, and, it's something that they would take with them after they left the theater.
Yeah.
Um, that's really what I remember.
Well, I think the NDEs. Everybody knows the term now. A few years ago, nobody knew what it was. Some people still don't know exactly what it is. So I think you're doing a good job of this film of educating people. And again, as I said even before, an even more rare thing or unknown thing would be a shared death experience, which is a thing for anybody that's listening that doesn't know. There are people that have had shared death experiences where they both cross over at the same time, or one person crosses over and the other person's here and they have a connection as it's going on. So I applaud you for being brave enough to do something like this. As you said, I guess not everybody is going to get. It's kind of weird for me to hear that because I'm like, why wouldn't everybody get it? But not everybody is at the level of thinking about these things that we are. So I think you're bringing that hopefully more into the mainstream, and people will find the film and find out more about that. I'm curious, what were the responses from the actors and that were playing in it? What did they talk about their characters?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there. I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe that NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.growth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, so certainly they related to the struggles that, the characters were going through.
Hmm.
Um, and just kind of the feelings of not being loved and, being unlovable, or, having, family members who didn't understand them.
Mm.
They certainly related to those elements a lot. And actually the actors were very, they were like best friends in real life. So they kind of had an automatic built-in chemistry, which was super useful for, directing them.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, and they were kind of able to tap into that shared history to, deliver on that intimacy. So yeah, that was really crucial. But yeah, I feel like, everyone in the, both in the cast and crew, they had some personal connection to the material. Like I know
Hmm.
that one of the crew members, had came up to me when we were shooting one particular scene, and was getting very emotional, and said that they had a very similar experience to what one of the characters had, in her life, and it was it was kind of uncanny how similar this, person on the crew was, how the film was reflecting her life. So there was
Hmm.
a lot of kind of uncanny happenings going on when we were filming.
Yeah. So, did you, we talked earlier about like the process of making a film, and I know there's some challenges that come across with any film. Were there any particular challenges that you ran into while you were making this film?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we lost, certain crew people. We lost certain, actor. We actually started filming having only cast the two lead actors. We didn't have any other actors, on board, but the date was coming up and we were like, okay, well, we need to start. So we have like 1 week of filming with just the two main characters, and we were able to cast the rest of the roles like during our lunch breaks. But yeah, it was very much like a fly by the seat of your pants kind of experience. And I mean, we were filming during COVID, and like everybody got sick, but it wasn't COVID. So we were able to keep filming. But if it had happened to be COVID, then we would have been totally screwed. So yeah, I mean, I'd have to kind of like go, through my memory and write down a list
Right.
of like all the
Right.
things that,
Yeah.
almost fell apart or whatever, or did fall apart, but then something came to replace it. But that's like, a guarantee in if you're making a movie is like 1,000 things will go wrong. But then,
Yeah.
you
I'd
know,
imagine it's a big leap of faith, right? So you start filming with just the two lead characters cast and just say, okay, we'll find the other people as we go along. So,
exactly.
it's a really interesting subject for your first feature film. Do you feel like you were intuitively guided to this subject, or do you feel like spirit played any role in your choice?
Sure. I mean, I feel like I was being led by the film. I didn't really know where I was going when I was writing, or like, what direction the story was taking me.
Mm,
And I wrote it over like a couple of years. And yeah, for a long time, I felt like it really wasn't working, and I wasn't getting anywhere, and I was kind of banging my head against a wall. But something told me to keep persisting and keep going with it. And yeah, it really felt like this story, gradually revealed itself to me, rather than myself being the driving force behind creating it.
mm,
So that was that was a major sign that something else was going on. And then yeah, just as I mentioned earlier, the filmmaking process just has so many uncertainties and so many you know uh there's so much kind of whiplash of you think something's going to go one way and then it goes the complete opposite way,
hmm.
that you kind of just need to allow things to unfold as they do.
Yeah. So now that the film is done, I imagine you feel a sense of relief. But now you've got the release coming up, and as we're recording this in about a month, what are your hopes for the film in terms of what you'd like to see it do, or just where would you like to see it go?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that, as many people watch it as possible, as many people, resonate with it as possible. And that, it finds a long life of, people discovering it and recommending it and, you know, uh, for it to make a difference in people's lives. That's the big hope. It's a very challenging environment right now to release a movie. There's a million reasons why, but the film industry has been going through a lot of turmoil recently.
Right,
Um, and especially for the kind of the little fish in the pond. Like myself, it can be really tough to cut through the noise and, for anyone to discover your work, just because there's so much competing for eyeballs. So,
right.
I'm just hoping that enough people discover it and recommend it.
Yeah. So have you thought about like going to certain organizations that promote spiritual type of stuff and seeing if they, I know we're doing this and I'm happy to help as much as possible, but I just wonder what other avenues you've pursued in trying to get the word out.
Yeah, things like this. Reaching out to people like yourself who talk about these topics and
Hmm.
trying to, just find the audience and make it available to them.
Yeah. So it's funny. I wrote a book. Everybody's written a book now, but I remember I was going through some coaching. The guy was like, "Well, don't think about this as writing your book. Think about this as writing your first book, right? Because we're going to be doing other things." So, do you have plans for other films in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know which film is going to be my next film, but I mean, I'm always writing. I have a bunch of screenplays that I would love to do next, and
Hmm.
you know, it's it's a matter of just finding the right partners and you know, getting access to the right resources and every film is like, just starting from scratch all over again.
I would imagine. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I certainly don't feel like this is my only film.
Right.
And there's a few ideas that I'd love to make for my next one.
So for someone who is thinking about getting on the creative path and wants to do something creative, what would be your advice to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that totally depends on what path that is. There are so many creative paths and, so many you know, things that people don't necessarily consider to be an art form, but that requires a ton of creativity.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, and every kind of art form is so totally different. I really only can speak to my own experience as a filmmaker and as a writer.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, as in terms of writing, your you know right like writing can be frustrating and kind of hard and writer's block is kind of a something that everybody knows about and has heard about and there can be a lot of inertia and resistance there but
Hmm.
kind of get once you get to a place where you're more comfortable writing than not writing, then you're, then the writing kind of takes on a life of its own. Like, I feel better on days when I write than on days when I don't. And,
Hmm.
if I haven't written in a while, then I start to go crazy. So, once you, um, you know, once you find yourself, once you make yourself right enough that, you feel better writing than not writing, um, then you're in a good place because, eventually, because, writing sustains you and feeds you. And even if, you don't attain any kind of outward success, the writing in and of itself is, feeds your soul,
Right.
and is something that, gives you is a gift in and of itself. And yeah, and I mean, in terms of filmmaking, there's a ton of, you know, every film is such a big investment. I mean, you can make a short film with, not very many resources, and that's amazing, and you should absolutely do that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, when you're attempting a bigger project, be very intentional about, the people who you work with and the people who you partner with,
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, yeah, the people who, it's such a collective endeavor that,
Right.
the people who you work with are going to bring so much to the table that that's going to, you know, greatly affect the work that you wind up making.
Right. So you mentioned earlier that you've been working this on the writing. I think you said a couple of years. Was there ever a point where you just said, and I think you kind of maybe alluded to this a little bit, was there ever a point where you just said, okay, this is not going to happen. I'm not going to get this out. This idea is probably, I can't finish it. Or did you ever feel any point where it's like, this is it? I'm done.
I mean, it was definitely frustrating for a long time. I don't know if well, that's kind of the thing, because if I'd said that, then I would have moved on to something else, and that would have been the end of that. And
Hmm.
I have, that's happened with plenty of projects where, I work on it for a while and then I'm like, okay, I've gotten this, either this isn't working and I'm finished, or,
Hmm.
I've gotten this to, a certain place, but, it's time to move on to work on something else. That happens all the time. But with this particular idea, there was something telling me not to give up on it. And,
Right.
I think that's kind of um, you know, yeah. And I kind of had to trust that voice.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. It seems like if you're, I would imagine you probably get lots of ideas, and you said, some of them come to fruition, some of them don't. But the thing I found is true. It's like a lot of times we have to go through a dark night, even with the project. We all hear about the dark night of the soul, but maybe even with the project or an endeavor that we're working on. And there's something about, trusting in spirit. I've heard some people say sometimes, well, if it's intended to be, it'll be easy. And I don't think that's necessarily true. So
Me
I think
neither.
that if we have that thing, I think you mentioned this earlier, maybe it's kind of like it's like your baby, right? You're developing this thing, and, having a baby is painful. I know you have a child, so you've seen that with your partner. Having a baby is painful. It's not an easy process. And I would imagine putting out something like this into the world has got to have some difficulty and maybe a little bit of fear too. How are people going to react to this?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you said it. You said it all. I have nothing to add to that.
Yeah, I just yeah, and I guess I want to applaud your bravery for taking on a subject that's not as well known, that maybe not be as entertaining, that, maybe some people say, okay, what was that? What did I just watch? Which is, again, not my reaction at all. But to go after that audience that is going to connect with it, and I think it will connect with them in a very deep way.
Yeah. Well, that's the hope. That's the dream.
Yeah. So as we're recording this will be out, in a little while. But when people hear this, most people hearing this, the film will already be out. So remind people of the name of the film, and where they'll be able to find it.
Definitely. So the film is called Upon Waking, and it'll be available on Amazon. It'll be available on Hoopla and Fandango at
Hmm.
first, and then in a few months, in May, it'll roll out to more streaming services, Tubi and Pluto and several other streaming services. So if
Okay.
you just Google Upon Waking film, it'll tell you where to watch
Okay.
whenever you might be listening to this.
And there's a website for the film too, right?
Yeah.
And the website is
Uponwakingfilm.com.
okay, uponwakingfilm.com. And again, I want to tell people I've already said it that I've watched it. I was really impressed by it. I think it's a great film. Even if you don't know the subject, it's something to familiarize with it. If you do know the subject, I think you'll find it really really interesting, and still will make you think about some of the things we talked about. The themes of forgiveness of others, forgiveness of self, the family dynamic issues that are in there. And it's actually really entertaining as well.
Well, thank you so much for watching and for making the time to chat. And yeah, it was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, well, Max, I wish you luck with it and let me know how it goes.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a great afternoon.
You too. Take care. many creative paths and, so many, you know, things that people don't necessarily consider to be an art form, but, that requires a ton of creativity.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, and every kind of art form is so totally different. I really only can speak to my own experience as a filmmaker and as a writer.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, as in terms of writing, your you know right, like, writing can be frustrating and kind of hard, and writer's block, is kind of a something that everybody knows about and has heard about. And there can be a lot of inertia and resistance there, but
Hmm.
kind of get once you get to a place where you're more comfortable writing than not writing, then you're, then the writing kind of takes on a life of its own. Like, I feel better on days when I write than on days when I don't. And,
Hmm.
if I haven't written in a while, then I start to go crazy. So, um, you know, once you find yourself, once you make yourself right enough that, you feel better writing than not writing, um, then you're in a good place because, eventually, because, writing sustains you and feeds you. And even if, you don't attain any kind of outward success, the writing in and of itself is, feeds your soul,
Right.
and is something that, gives you is a gift in and of itself. And yeah, and I mean, in terms of filmmaking, there's a ton of, you know, every film is such a big investment. I mean, you can make a short film with, not very many resources, and that's amazing, and you should absolutely do that.
Hmm.
But you know, when you're attempting a bigger project, be very intentional about, the people who you work with and the people who you partner with,
Hmm.
because, you know, um, yeah, the people who, it's such a collective endeavor that,
Right.
you know, the people who you work with are going to bring so much to the table that that's going to, you know, greatly affect the work that you wind up making.
Right. So you mentioned earlier that you've been working this on the writing, I think you said a couple of years. Was there ever a point where you just said, and I think you kind of maybe alluded to this a little bit, was there ever a point where you just said, okay, this is not going to happen. I'm not going to get this out. This idea is probably, I can't finish it. Or did you ever feel any point where it's like, this is it? I'm done.
I mean, it was definitely frustrating for a long time. I don't know if well, that's kind of the thing, because if I'd said that, then I would have moved on to something else, and that would have been the end of that. And
Hmm.
I have, that's happened with plenty of projects where, I work on it for a while and then I'm like, okay, I've gotten this, either this isn't working and I'm finished, or,
Hmm.
I've gotten this to, a certain place, but, it's time to move on to work on something else. That happens all the time. But with this particular idea, there was something telling me not to give up on it. And,
Right.
I think that's kind of um, you know, yeah. And I kind of had to trust that voice.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. It seems like if you're, I would imagine you probably get lots of ideas, and you said, some of them come to fruition, some of them don't. But the thing I found is true. It's like a lot of times we have to go through a dark night even with the project, we all hear about the dark night of the soul, but maybe even with the project or an endeavor that we're working on. And there's something about, trusting in spirit. I've heard some people say sometimes, well, if it's intended to be, it'll be easy. And I don't think that's necessarily true. So
Me
I think
neither.
that if we have that thing, I think you mentioned this earlier, maybe it's kind of like it's like your baby, right? You're developing this thing, and having a baby is painful. I know you have a child, so you've seen that with your partner. Having a baby is painful. It's not an easy process. And I would imagine putting out something like this into the world has got to have some difficulty and maybe a little bit of fear too. How are people going to react to this?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you said it. You said it all. I have nothing to add to that.
Yeah, I just yeah, and I guess I want to applaud your bravery for taking on a subject that's not as well known, that maybe not be as entertaining, that maybe some people say, okay, what was that? What did I just watch? Which is again not my reaction at all, but to go after that audience that is going to connect with it, and I think it will connect with them in a very deep way.
Yeah. Well, that's the hope. That's the dream.
Yeah. So as we're recording this will be out, in a little while. But when people hear this, most people hearing this, the film will already be out. So remind people of the name of the film, and where they'll be able to find it.
Definitely. So the film is called Upon Waking, and it'll be available on Amazon. It'll be available on Hoopla and Fandango at
Mhm.
first, and then in a few months, in May, it'll roll out to more streaming services, Tubi and Pluto and several other streaming services. So if
Okay.
you just Google Upon Waking film, it'll tell you where to watch
Okay.
whenever you might be listening to this.
And there's a website for the film too, right?
Yeah.
And the website is
Uponwakingfilm.com.
okay, uponwakingfilm.com. And again, I want to tell people I've already said it that I've watched it. I was really impressed by it. I think it's a great film. Even if you don't know the subject, it's something to familiarize with it. If you do know the subject, I think you'll find it really really interesting, and still will make you think about, like, some of the things we talked about. The themes of forgiveness of others, forgiveness of self, the family dynamic issues that are in there. And it's actually really entertaining as well.
Well, thank you so much for watching and for making the time to chat. And yeah, it was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, well, Max, I wish you luck with it, and let me know how it goes.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a great afternoon.
You too. Take care.
Hey there, if you liked this episode, come on over and talk about it. Let me know what you liked. If you didn't like this episode, come on over and talk about it. Let me know what you didn't like. Go to grieftogrowth.com/community and look for Talk About the Podcast. I'll see you there.